I was sort of like one of the first in of the major increase in people. Derek Ackerman joined soon after that, and I worked closely together. The development in those days was done by coding things on bits of paper and sending them to the punch room, who then punched things up and put them onto the system, and we had what was called an RJE room.
Yeah. Remote job
entry, where you went and submitted the jobs, and you actually had to book that room, and you got 20 minutes or 30-minute sessions. And then things improved with a thing called Roscoe, which allowed you to do things a little more interactively. Sorry, Anne.
That's for you.
That's James. Can you phone? Right, Anyway, we developed these systems, and then in 1977 we had a full-scale simulation where we simulated the actual ships arriving, and that's when Richard Downing first got involved. He was a user in those days. He came up from Safmarine to show us computer guys how to do things, I think.
Still doing it.
Still doing it, yeah. Computer soldiers in the front. Before we went live, it's quite interesting, we had to have a memory upgrade on this computer. And I'm not quite sure whether it was a quarter of a megabyte or half a megabyte. So we had to upgrade it with. But what was interesting is the actual cost of that. The cost of £750,000 for the upgrade. That's expensive to fund. Okay, the first test we arrived, most people don't know this, we were sending these international exchange files from Europe down to here, and the European partners were supposed to send the files down to us. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and I got a phone call to say a guy called Peters, and I can't remember his first name, had arrived from Belgium. And the CMB wanted to be the first people to bring us a tape, and he'd flown out with his first test tape for us. Well, eventually the first vessel sailed, and we went live, and a few little problems. The first container manifest took 12 hours to run. It worried the hell out of us. And much to the relief of some people who know, this freight accounting system actually worked, which we were very worried about. We then went into a normal sort of, after that went live, we went into a normal computer development phase where we added all sorts of systems, accounting systems. We'd been processing at a bureau called MCS beforehand, and those were added, and we did the Far East trade, and we did, Liz just reminded me of, we had to change the 7-digit voyage numbers, which she was handling. And a lot of things we're doing, and I think with the early years and those later years, we did develop one sort of ethos, which was a good Christmas party. Lynn Inch was reminding me of it earlier, and I was actually going to talk about it because of one of the parties, I didn't realize it was the earliest 78. I always remember Tim Hill and a few others who should be nameless because some of them are here, plucking up courage to throw Yvonne Tibbs, who was the boss's secretary, into the swimming pool. But I think we were banned from that location after that.
We never went to the same place twice.
Anyway, we were while all this development was going on, we were told to sort of enter the first commercial phase in about 1982-83. The Safmarine board took a decision that we should form a major computer company. And as part of Safren by that stage, we were told to form the fourth leg, a separate computer company with Safmarine as a leg, Rennies as a leg, and the Saf Holdings as a leg. So we set about to doing it. And by coincidence, we had done a feasibility study on setting up a backup site. We'd done the feasibility study jointly with BP, Shell, Merle, and now Engen. And we couldn't get agreement on how to share the costs of this. So we set it up as a commercial operation, which was SAFCover. And they went live in March 1984. We actually opened 3 months earlier, in December 1983, when SA Druggist, which is now part of one of the big drug companies here, had a fire and the computer operation burnt down. When the IT manager in the middle of the night phoned the MD of SA Druggist, he just said, well, I've just signed a contract for Safcover, so I'm fine, I can go back to bed. And we had the site half built, and the guys managed to scramble around, find computers and open up and start running it. Safcover became the largest backup operation in the country. We bought out 2 main competitors, which were CEB, and in those days IBM's disaster recovery operation, to form a very successful operation. MCS Bureau and Creda Press were bought, and we started outside processing on the Bureau. UCT became our largest client, and we processed them for around about 10 years, maybe 6 to 96. We also became a reseller of AS400s. Unfortunately, part of the MCS Bureau was an organization called Computer Shop, and they were the first retail sort of PC organization in the country. But in 1987, 88, they went belly up and went bust, and we had to close the whole thing down. And the board decided that we would sort of get out of this volatile computer business. So Creda was sold in 1990, MCS was sold to Graham Krobler and a few other people in 1991. Although we kept Safcover going. Safcover was probably one of the most profitable operations in Safmarine, but eventually we sold it to IBM in 1995. And with Stewart and Robinson and his whole team of people moving to IBM. Some of them are still there. And because while this was underway, there was still development going on. And really, 1989, when I look at it, it was a fairly significant year. Profs, now this really shows my age, was installed as an email system running on the mainframe. And I remember organizing with IBM a demo to our directors of Profs, and it was an absolute disaster. It set us back about 9 months in getting the thing installed. It wouldn't work. The IBM computer broke down, all sorts of things. And we sold it in the end to replace Telex. We were the second largest user of Telex in the country after SAA. Can any of you remember Telex?
Yeah.
And I always remember one day, Telex came through from, I don't know, the other post office or Telcom in those days, wherever it was, saying, you haven't paid the bill, we're closing you down. That's the second largest client. And we had to scramble and get it up and running again. In 1989, MCS was still processing the 2 Oceans sort of finishing line and doing all the results from it, which was interesting. It moved on to other people later on. Compass was put in the client so they could do online bookings and things. I was looking at the Signal magazine, and I note that Margie Jordan joined then. And the modeling for the Key project started in 1989. And again, this became a sort of second wave of major staff build-up. The first Key project started in 92 and was installed in January 93. In 93, we became the first SAP R3 site in South Africa. In 94, we installed Business Objects as the first operation here. And in 1995, we moved away from this big computer and put CC Mail in. And everybody then in Safmarine had PCs. Key was completed in July 96, cost of 42 million. It's cheap at the sound of what you hear now. And there were a lot of hassles of budgets along the way, but it was virtually identical to Richard's first estimate in 1990 for what it would cost us. I started to phase out from then, and so I've asked Richard to now take over to follow the further bits, and I'm sure he'll talk about some of the early days as well. Thanks.